London Mayor Sadiq Khan is this week demanding new powers from the government. Yes, the London Mayor is saying that he wants the power to control rent across the London Boroughs. Indeed, the Mayor said earlier this week that London's private renters are facing a triple whammy, with rising rents, bills and the cost of household essentials putting a major strain on their finances. But should the Mayor be given powers in this area? And particularly, are government limits on the amount that private businesses are allowed to charge for their services the right solution here? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Tony Devenish, a Conservative London Assembly member. Tony, thank you for joining me this morning. Firstly, of course, you are a Conservative member of the London Assembly. No doubt you would be opposed to many proposals that the current mayor might be making. But potentially there may well be a future Conservative mayor. Isn't it reasonable that the devolved mayors of this country might be given more powers over these areas?
Absolutely, Tom. Good morning. Absolutely happy for the mayor and mayors across the country to have more powers. But let's talk about this specific proposal, because this is just Mr. Khan at his most irresponsible. The way this came about is because when Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, Khan was trying to be seen to be hard left. And he came up with this policy of a way of basically saving his own skin within the eternal Labour Party. The reality is, as you know, in Berlin, in Ireland and in Scotland, this policy, when implemented, has made renters' life and the economy far, far worse. It's basic, any of your viewers will know this, it's supply and demand. All this does, it drives people out of renting their properties to people. It causes a disaster. And at a time where we're in a cost of living crisis, the last thing we need is rents going up even more, which they would if you regulated them in the way that Sadiq Khan wants to do. This is purely a Labour Party politics. It's got nothing to do with the very serious cost of living crisis that we are all facing. And it's completely irresponsible. But as you said at the beginning of the item, the good news is Mr. Khan hasn't got the power to do this. This is just him talking to what he considers is left of his own party. It's not going to happen, so your viewers shouldn't be worried.
It's funny when we're talking about something like rent control. On the face of it, it sounds like it would control rents. It sounds like a very easy solution to a pretty tricky problem. But I suppose if we look at the question of supply and demand, which you rightly raise, at the moment, there are far more people looking for accommodation in London than there are units of accommodation available for rent. And if there are limits on what potential landlords could charge for their properties, fewer of those properties would be on the market. The supply and demand problem would become even more exaggerated. Is this you, Tony Devenish, saying that there needs to be more building in London in order to assuage that supply and demand question?
Exactly, Tom. There's only two ways that you can improve things. One is to encourage existing homeowners or building owners to actually rent their property out. And the way to do that is not to bring in this ridiculous policy. But the other way, absolutely. And actually the 1945 Labour government and the Macmillan Conservative government knew this in the 1950s. You have to build more homes. So actually, what's Mr. Khan done in 6 years as mayor? Well, he's actually had a lot of money from the government to build affordable housing because we need to do that in London. In fact, he's had £5 billion in his first term to build 116,000 social houses. And at the moment, 2 years after the original programme should have been completed, he hasn't even started 25,000 of those 116,000. Mr. Khan is always great at issuing press releases. He's never very good at actually delivering, as we know from his record on crime, his record on housing, and his record on transport.
You touched upon the case studies of rent control being introduced in Ireland and in Berlin in particular. What do those show us over the last few years?
Well, I've got the figures in front of me for Berlin. When Berlin brought this ridiculous policy in, supply literally went down 41%. I mean, I think that sums it up, really. The reality is no landlord is going to rent their property out if they're going to have the inability to actually pay their mortgage. And Mr. Khan actually got caught on one of your competitors' TV program yesterday where he said, oh, people won't have any trouble paying their mortgage if they're renting their property out, basically. It's crazy. All he is going to do, if he had the power, I stress to any of your viewers that have come in during this item, Sadiq Khan doesn't have the power to do this crazy policy. But if he did, and if a future Labour government brought in rent controls, it would absolutely destroy the housing market across the country. And the reality is the people that will really be hurt will be the most vulnerable and those that are renting. Those people literally will be paying far more because there'll be far fewer properties. It's that simple. Only a socialist like Mr. Khan would think that supply and demand doesn't work.
It's remarkable when put out that clearly that this is even considered. I believe it was a famous Swedish socialist economist who said not that long ago that there are the only way more surefire to destroy the housing stock of a city other than bombing was indeed this policy proposed by the London mayor. It's a fascinating case study, and as you say, clearly no power in his hands to do it right now. And I don't doubt from your comments this morning that this Conservative government is unlikely to be handing that power over to Mr. Khan anytime soon. For now, Tony Devenish, the Conservative London Assembly member, thank you so much for joining us on the briefing this morning.